Over the summer, I received an email from a classmate of mine from the seminary. And in the email, he simply acknowledged the attachment, or actually it wasn't an attachment, it was a link. And he simply encouraged me to go to the link because, of course, he said in his brief comment on the email, it's helping me learn how to live again. Well, he had me hooked. I had to click on the link. And I did, and all of a sudden, what came up was an article, and the title of the article was Regrets. Well, now I really was hooked. What would this article be about? Regrets. Well, as I began reading, I discovered that the author of the article had spent several months doing research. And the research that the author of this article did was he met with hospice nurses, men and women who dedicate their entire lives to serving those who are dying. And so in the course of his surveying these hospice nurses, he asked them if they discovered in their ministering to those who were dying, if those who were dying had any regrets or that they spoke about in the process of dying. And the purpose of the article was to name the top 5 regrets that hospice nurses heard over and over again from those who were dying. And the first of the regrets was this: I wish I had let myself be happier. I wish I had let myself be happier. Now, as I read that, I wasn't surprised that certainly happiness would be one of those regrets that would be listed, but what surprised me was how it was that those who are in the process of dying, how they articulated that regret. Notice what they said: I wish I had let myself be happier. That's what surprised me. Because all of us here this morning are guilty of the fact that we are convinced, or at least we try to convince ourselves, don't we, at some point in time in our lives, perhaps more than we care to admit, that somehow we are convinced that happiness, our happiness, is external to us. That it's because of that person that I'm happy or not happy. It's because of that situation that I'm happy or I'm not happy. So oftentimes our happiness is found in that which is outside of ourselves. And so we are either quick to blame or to praise the external as the source or the lack thereof of happiness. It's true, it's actually the fuel that drives the disease of addiction, because the person experiencing the disease finds in him or herself this need, this desire to be happy, and so of course they turn to the bottle, or they turn to the pill, or they turn to whatever it is, because of course they've convinced themselves, the disease has, that happiness is out there. And yet those who are in the process of dying named to the hospice nurses that they wished they had let themselves be happier. In other words, they were naming that which is inside of us. That happiness is not to be found out there somewhere, but it's ultimately found in here. It's already inside each and every one of us. We have only to embrace it, to claim it as our own, and most importantly, to share that with those around us. We realize when we encounter somebody that is truly happy, don't we? Why, it's contagious, and there's something about that individual, there's something about their spirit that absolutely lifts us up, that makes a difference in our life. There's something about that spirit of happiness and joy that radiates from another that invites you and I to want to be a part of that way of living. I wish I had let myself be happier. It's the amazing thing, actually, if you think about it, of the gospel story today. As difficult and as strange as today's parable is, strange because Jesus is actually commending, holding up for you and I as an example to follow, a dishonest steward. Isn't that crazy? That a dishonored steward would be raised up to you and I as someone to follow. And what Jesus is inviting you and I to see in this parable story is that the dishonest steward has been driven his whole life by material wealth, by the need to be able to have stuff. It's the what that matters in his life. And all of a sudden, because of his dishonesty, he finds himself at risk of not having happiness found in the what he has, because it's about to be taken away. So he uses his ingenuity. He uses his brains. He uses what he has because, he's too weak to dig and he's too ashamed to beg. So he'll do whatever it needs to make sure that he has what he needs, at least in his mind, for happiness. So what does he do? He develops relationships. He develops relationships. He moves from what he has to recognizing he also has to be attentive to who he has in his life. So he's quick to gather in the debtors. He's quick to do them a favor so that he might have them down the road. It's a movement from what I have to who I have, which in the end, my friends, is really all that we will care about. It's all that matters. It is the source of our true happiness. It's not what we own. It's not what we possess. It's not the degrees behind our name. It's not our accomplishments. No, true happiness is found in the relationships that you and I develop and that we embrace and that we enter into throughout our lives. As the prophet Amos reminds us today, it's about tending to the widow and the poor. It's about being mindful of those who are less fortunate than ourselves. It is about being agents of compassion and agents of mercy and agents of care and agents of reaching out and welcoming the stranger, of loving the outcast, of being attentive to the poor among us and around us. It's the development of relationships wherein you and I then are preparing and you and I are doing what we need to do with all of our ingenuity, with all of our creativity, with all of our energy, with all of our brains. Why, together, if we focus in on serving God, who is found in the marginalized, who is found in the outcast, who is found in the lonely, who is found in the widow, who is found in those who grieve the loss of a loved one, why, when you and I devote our time and our attention to developing those relationships, why, we will have discovered, we will have unlocked, we will have come to know the secret to true happiness. And in the end, hopefully then, you and I will not have that as one of our regrets, because you and I will have chosen each and every day to be happier.